Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah amma ba'd. The Prophet ﷺ, when they were prevented from entering Mecca to do Umrah during the very well-known incident of Sulh Hudaybiyah, the Treaties of Hudaybiyah, the Prophet ﷺ and the companions had already put their ihram on. So what that means is they already entered a state of Umrah. And so we're familiar when we go to Umrah from Medina, we put on the ihram, or while we're landing in Jeddah, we put on the ihram. And we can't take that ihram off until we fulfill the rituals of Umrah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes and gives us a scenario where, well, what happens if you're prevented from completing Umrah? There's a very particular way of removing ihram and concluding the Umrah without doing the formal rituals of Umrah. And so as a result of the treatise of Hudaybiyah, the Prophet and the companions were prevented and restricted from entering Mecca and doing Umrah. So the Prophet ﷺ tells the companions, all right, everybody, this is what we're going to do to remove ourselves from the state of ihram. Do you know what happened? These are the companions, remember? The companions, these are the people who sacrificed everything for the Prophet. You know what they did? They refused. They refused. The Prophet ﷺ is telling them to do something, and they're being stubborn about it. They don't want to do it. They want to go and do Umrah. Their mind is set on Umrah. How many times do our family members kind of be stubborn with us? We tell them to do something, they don't listen. Oh, we get all frustrated and do this, and we start yelling at them and we start presenting words to them. And the Prophet got frustrated. He's a human being, alayhi salatu wasalam. And I'm telling you to do something and you're not listening. And he, frustrated, with all the frustration, he enters into his tent where his wife was there, and he told his wife what was going on. He's frustrated. And she tells the Prophet ﷺ, why don't you try the following? Go out, tell someone to come and cut your hair, to shave your head, and take off your ihram. Meaning, go outside, don't say anything, act, just do. So the Prophet listens to her advice, goes outside, shaves his head, right, and takes off his ihram. And do you know what happened? All the companions did the same exact thing. They started shaving each other's head, and they were frustrated. In fact, they said they were so frustrated, they were cutting each other's head because of the anger. You know, when you're angry, you become a little bit rougher. So they were cutting each other's head. But they did. Notice, when the Prophet said something, they didn't listen. When he did something, they followed. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ was a role model. He led the companions by becoming a role model for them. Be a role model for the people around you. You want a strong family? You want a healthy family? Guess what? It starts with you. How can we expect our children to be good if we're not good? How can we expect our spouses to be kind and compassionate when we're not the same way? How can we expect something from someone else when we're not willing to do it? You want a healthy family, you got to be a role model for them. And the Prophet ﷺ is the best role model for all of humanity. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرِ. In the Prophet ﷺ is the best role model. He lived it. And you know what, in our times today, when you look at all the problems, mental health problems, the dissolution of the family, all the woes that we see, it really goes back to a crisis in leadership. Even organizations, companies are starting to suffer. Man, I read a statistic the other day that shocked me. It was very interesting. In the 1960s, the average lifespan of a company was 61 years. The average lifespan of a company is 61 years. Now, the average lifespan of a company is 18 years. And when the statisticians looked at this, they started saying, man, what happened? What's causing this? You know what the cause is? Poor leadership. And do you know what happens when poor leadership comes about? Or why poor leadership happens? Well, one of the things is an obsession with outcomes. These companies are becoming weaker. Why? Because it's all about meeting the margins. All about meeting the quarterly goals. they're willing to lay off half of the workforce in order to meet their quarterly goals. There's an obsession about outcomes. You know what? Our parenting styles, we're very similar. We're all too familiar with, you need to get straight A's. You need to go to this college. You need to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. These are the goals. You have to follow them. There is an obsession with outcomes. Look, we want the community to be strong, well-trained, in good fields. We want that. But there's a difference between encouraging it and promoting it versus being obsessed with it. No. A good leader isn't obsessed with outcomes. A good leader is obsessed with building people. The Prophet ﷺ didn't have in his mind, by the end of my life, I want to make sure that there are X amount of Muslims. It's not the way it worked. What the Prophet did is, when he left this world, he built a community. He built leaders. He built role models that we today, 1400 years later, look to them in terms of our own affairs. Alayhi salatu wassalam wa radiyallahu ta'ala anhum jami'an. We got to get away from this obsession with outcomes. Another reason for bad leadership, being a bad role model, is this what's called the mechanic metaphor. We raise each other to be like a machine. As soon as I press the button, it brings out a predictable outcome. Oh son, when I tell you to do something, you do it when I tell you and exactly the way I told you. Oh daughter, when I tell you to do something, you do it the way I told you and exactly the way I told you. You have to fill out the homework exactly the way it's meant to be filled out. And you create a machine. You don't create a person. Leadership, being a role model, isn't about teaching a person a set of instructions. Rather, an effective leader is someone who teaches the person how to navigate life, how to deal with complex situations. Well, what are you going to do when life is tough, my son, my daughter? What are you going to do? You're going to be patient. You're going to remember things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you. You give them the tools and the skills to navigate the complexities of life. Don't turn them into machine. That is a poor leadership style. That's not a role model, right? Another problem for the crisis of leadership today is that they're non-deterministic dimensions, right? And this idea that we focus too much, our focus on outcomes causes us to forget about ourselves. Self-awareness. Most people don't know who they really are. Most people don't realize the bad characteristics of themselves. You know how they say when you point your finger, you got one finger pointing and three fingers pointing back? Right? There's a wisdom behind that. And Islam teaches us this. من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعني. It is part of good Islam to leave the things that don't matter to you. Focus on yourself, not on other people. So there is this crisis of leadership. The question is, well, how can we be better role models, better leaders, so that we leave the next generation as better than us? Well, some things that we need to focus on is manners. Number one, manners. What made the Prophet the best role model was his manners. Alayhi salatu wasalam. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You have beautiful, great character. That's why he's beloved. That's why he's respected. That's why we look to him for our own selves. We build ourselves as Muslims around the persona of the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because he had good manners. You want to be a role model for the people around you? Improve your manners. When you improve your manners, then the people around you will absorb that. You will influence them. Another thing that we need to be good role models and to be good leaders for our families is to we focus on showing them how to navigate life situations, as I mentioned before. Okay? I'm not interested in my child being exactly like me. I'm not interested in a child who just hears and obeys fellow human beings. I'm interested in a child who knows how to do the right thing. I'm interested in a child who knows what the right thing is. That is being a role model. And so whenever we're going through a difficulty, We know that we can look to the Prophet ﷺ to find guidance on how to navigate that. That's why he's our role model. And he does it in the best ways, ﷺ. And finally, connect your goals with the afterlife. When you teach your fellow family member, your loved one, something, when you tell them to pray, you're setting for them a precedence that, I pray, I'm your father, you're seeing me pray, oh child, you're seeing me do salah and take it seriously. I'm telling you to pray. Let me tell you why it's important. And you tie it back to the afterlife. Oh, my child, sometimes you're going to go through difficulties in life. You have to be patient. I'm going to show my loved one that I'm patient in difficult times. And I'm going to encourage him or her to be patient. And then I'm going to tie it back to the afterlife. إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. On the day of judgment, man, Allah has prepared reward for the patient people you can't imagine. This always gives this sense of purpose and meaning behind the things that we do. You want to be a role model? You have to do these things. You have to embody these things. And in order to have a healthy family, then you need to be a role model for the people around you. And I ask you this, what is the favorite aspect of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of him being your role model? What is it that you love most about him ﷺ? Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum everybody. Thank you for watching. If you're finding benefit in these videos, remember that every day throughout the month of Ramadan, we'll be releasing a new video. Our goal is to build a stronger family, especially in our times today when the family unit is really dissolving. It's so important for us as Muslims and to serve as a role model for all of humanity. Share these videos, like, drop a comment, and we'll see you at the next video. Bismillah.